My name is Olivia Grace Harper, but everyone calls me Liv. I'm 34, living in Portland, Oregon, where I run a small interior design studio focused on sustainable living spaces. I love turning empty rooms into homes that feel warm, intentional, like they hold stories. But if you asked my family, they'd say I'm something else entirely. Liv, the fixer, the one who always swoops in to clean up their messes. For years, I wore that role like a badge of honor, even when it started to weigh me down. I've paid for things I shouldn't have had to, like the $70,000 0 cents in debt my dad Robert racked up, chasing risky business loans for ventures that never panned out, or the rent for my mom Susan when she swore she'd get back on her feet after her temporary financial slump. And don't get me started on my younger brother Lucas. He's 29, charming, and perpetually broke. I funded his dream of opening a trendy coffee shop, only for it to crash and burn in less than a year, because he spent more time partying than managing it. I told myself it was fine. Family sticks together, right? You don't turn your back on blood, no matter how many times they let you down. But the truth is, I was drowning. Every time I wrote a check or transferred money, a piece of me wondered why I was the only one trying to keep us together. Mom never asked how my business was doing. Dad only called when he needed a quick loan. Lucas would send me Venmo requests with smiley emojis like I was his personal ATM. I kept telling myself it was love, that this was what family meant. But deep down, I felt like I was suffocating under their expectations. Last week, I got a text from my mom. "Liv, darling, come to the house at 6 p.m. tonight. We're planning a special family reunion just for you." I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the screen. A reunion? We hadn't had one since I was a kid, and even then it was just an excuse for everyone to eat, drink, and argue. Mom's special usually meant she wanted something. The last time she used that word, I ended up co-signing a lease for Lucas's coffee shop, which left me scrambling to cover the payments when he defaulted. I sat in my car outside the studio, the rain tapping softly on the windshield. Portland's gray skies mirrored how I felt, cloudy, uncertain. I typed back, "Sounds great, I'll be there," but my gut twisted. I'd helped pay for that house in the suburbs 5 years ago, a family investment, Mom called it, though it's in their names, not mine. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep playing the role of the good daughter forever. Something had to give. I pulled up to the house just before 6, the familiar cedar siding glowing under the porch light. Through the windows, I could see shadows moving, hear the hum of voices and laughter. It looked warm, inviting, like the kind of family gathering you see in movies, but my fingers tightened on the steering wheel. I'd been burned too many times to believe this was just about catching up. I stepped out, adjusted my scarf, and walked to the door, my heart pounding louder than the rain. Whatever was waiting inside, I told myself I'd face it head-on, because if there's one thing I've learned from designing spaces, it's this. Sometimes you have to tear down the old to build something better. I pushed open the front door, and the warmth of the house hit me like a wave. The smell of roasted chicken and rosemary filled the air, and for a split second, I almost believed this was a real family reunion. My mom, Susan, stood there in a navy dress, her makeup flawless, her smile a little too wide. "Liv, you're here," she squealed, pulling me into a hug that felt more performative than genuine. Her perfume was overpowering, like she'd doused herself to mask something else. "Surprise!" a chorus of voices shouted. I blinked, taking in the crowded living room. There was my dad, Robert, holding a glass of wine and grinning like he'd just won the lottery. My brother Lucas leaned against the couch, his hair artfully messy, flashing me a wink. Aunt Ellen and Uncle Carl were there, along with Cousin Tessa, who I hadn't seen since she borrowed $500, 0 cents, from me 2 years ago and never paid it back. Even my mom's cousin Greg, who only showed up when there was free food or money floating around, was hovering by the snack table. The room buzzed with energy, but it felt off, like a stage set for a play I hadn't rehearsed. "Wow, you guys really went all out," I said, forcing a smile. My eyes scanned the room, searching for clues. Mom guided me toward the dining table, her hand on my arm a little too firm. "We just wanted to bring everyone together, Liv. It's been too long," she said, her voice sweet but sharp at the edges. Dad handed me a drink, a lavender mojito, which he claimed was my favorite. I hadn't touched mojitos since I was 27, but I took it anyway, the cold glass grounding me. Sit, Mom urged, nudging me toward a chair at the head of the table. The chatter quieted, and I felt every pair of eyes on me. That's when I saw it. A sleek black folder on the table, the kind you'd expect from a lawyer's office. It was positioned perfectly, like it had been placed there for me to notice. My stomach twisted. I sat down, but my hand instinctively reached for the folder. The cover read, "Margaret Harper Inheritance Trust Agreement." "What's this?" I asked, keeping my tone light, but my eyes locked on Mom. She waved a hand, her bracelets jangling. "Oh, just some paperwork, honey, nothing to worry about right now. Let's enjoy the party." Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and I caught her glancing at Dad, who was suddenly very interested in his wine glass. "I'd like to take a look," I said, flipping open the folder before she could stop me. The first page made my breath catch. "I, Olivia Grace Harper, hereby transfer all rights to the Margaret Harper Inheritance Trust to a family-managed fund." I scanned further, my heart racing. The trust was worth $15 million, 0 cents. My grandmother's entire estate, left to me when she passed last year. But this document? It would hand control to my parents, with no guarantee I'd see a dime. "Mom, what is this?" I asked again, my voice steady but colder now. She laughed, a high-pitched sound that didn't match the tension in her shoulders. "Liv, it's just for tax purposes. You know how complicated estates are. We're trying to make things easier for everyone." Her words were smooth, rehearsed, but I wasn't buying it. "Easier for who?" I pressed, my eyes flicking to Dad, then Lucas. My brother shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Liv, come on," Lucas cut in, his tone half pleading, half annoyed. "It's for the family. We all agreed this is the best way. Just sign it." His words hit like a slap. "Agreed? Without me?" I closed the folder, my fingers tightening around it. "So this is why you threw this party? To trick me into signing away my inheritance?" The room went silent, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. Mom's smile faltered, and she leaned forward, her voice low. "Don't make a scene, Olivia. Everyone's here. Let's not ruin the night." I looked around at the faces I'd known my whole life. My parents, my brother, my aunts and uncles. They weren't just here for a reunion. They were here to take something that was mine, something Grandma Margaret had entrusted to me. I pushed the folder back toward Mom, my voice calm but firm. "I'm not signing anything tonight." Uncle Carl cleared his throat from the corner. "Liv, you're being selfish. This is about family unity." Selfish? The word stung, but it also lit a fire in me. I'd spent years giving them everything, my money, my time, my trust, and now I was selfish for wanting to protect what was mine? I stood, the chair scraping against the floor. If this is what family unity looks like, maybe I've been doing it wrong. My voice didn't waver, but my hands were shaking. Mom reached for my arm, her nails digging in slightly. "Liv, please, let's talk about this privately." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, pulling away. "Not like this." I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, the folder still in my hand. The weight of their stares followed me, but I didn't look back. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing. I was done letting them write the rules. The air in the living room felt thick, like I was breathing through a straw. My family's eyes were on me, some pleading, some accusing, all waiting for me to back down. I clutched the black folder, its edges digging into my palms, and stood my ground. My mom, Susan, was still leaning toward me, her hand hovering like she wanted to grab the folder back. "Liv, don't do this," she said, her voice low, almost a hiss. "You're embarrassing everyone." "Embarrassing?" I repeated, my voice louder than I intended. I looked around the room. taking in the faces I'd spent my life trying to please. Dad was staring at his shoes, his wine glass forgotten on the table. Lucas was slouched on the couch, scrolling on his phone like this was just another Tuesday. Aunt Ellen and Uncle Carl exchanged glances, their disapproval practically radiating. Cousin Tessa was picking at her nails, avoiding the whole scene, and Greg, Mom's cousin, was still by the snack table, pretending to be invisible. Not one of them spoke up to defend me. "Why would you do this?" I asked, turning back to Mom. "If this was really about Grandma's estate, why not just talk to me? Why the party, the folder, the ambush?" My voice cracked, betraying the hurt I'd been holding back. I wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding, that they hadn't planned to betray me, but the silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Dad finally looked up, his face tight. "Liv, you're blowing this out of proportion. We just thought it'd be simpler if we handled the trust. You're so busy with your design work you don't need the stress." His words sounded reasonable, but they were laced with something else. Guilt, maybe? Or desperation? "Simpler for who?" I shot back. "For you? For Mom? For Lucas, who can't keep a business afloat for more than 6 months?" My brother's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "That's not fair, Liv," he said, his voice sharp. "You've helped me before. What's the big deal now?" "The big deal?" I laughed, but it was bitter, hollow. "The big deal is, I've been bailing you out my whole life and you all thought you could trick me into giving up what Grandma left me. That's not help. That's theft." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. I saw Mom flinch, but she didn't deny it. Uncle Carl piped up again, his voice gruff. "Olivia, you're making everyone uncomfortable. This isn't how family behaves." I turned to him, my anger flaring. "Really? So family means lying to me? Using me? I've paid for this house, for Lucas's failures, for Dad's debts, and now I'm the bad guy for saying no?" Before anyone could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "She's right." I turned to see Chloe, my best friend, standing by the doorway. I hadn't even noticed her arrive. She must have slipped in during the chaos. Her eyes were steady, her presence like a lifeline. "Liv's given you everything," she said, stepping closer. "And you repay her with this? You should be ashamed." Mom's face hardened. "This is a family matter, Chloe. Stay out of it." But Chloe didn't back down. She looked at me, her nod subtle, but enough to remind me I wasn't alone. That small gesture lit something inside me, a spark of courage I'd been too afraid to let burn. I took a deep breath, facing my family again. "Grandma Margaret left that trust to me for a reason. She knew what you were capable of, and tonight you proved her right." My words landed like stones, and for the first time I saw uncertainty flicker across Mom's face. Lucas shifted, his phone forgotten. Even Dad looked uneasy, his hands fidgeting. Mom stood, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. "If you walk out that door without signing, Olivia, you'll regret it. You'll lose us. Is that what you want?" Her threat was meant to cut, to pull me back into line, but instead it clarified everything. "I've spent my life trying not to lose you," I said quietly. "But if this is what family means, lies, manipulation, ultimatums, then maybe I'm better off without it." I turned to Chloe, my voice steady. "Let's go." She nodded, grabbing her coat. I walked toward the door, the folder still in my hand, my heart pounding but not with fear. It was something else. Freedom, maybe, or the start of it. As I stepped outside, the cool Portland rain hit my face, washing away the weight of their expectations. Mom's voice called after me, "You're making a mistake, Liv." But I didn't turn back. Chloe's car was parked across the street, and we slid inside, the quiet hum of the engine a stark contrast to the chaos I'd just left. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Not yet," I said, staring out the window as the house faded into the distance. "But I will be." The rain streaked across the glass, blurring the world outside. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing. I was done letting them define me. The rain was still falling as Chloe drove us away from the house, the wipers sweeping rhythmically across the windshield. I sat in the passenger seat, the black folder in my lap, its weight heavier than it should have been. My hands were still trembling from the confrontation, but my mind was racing, piecing together what had just happened. My family hadn't just thrown a party. They'd orchestrated a trap to strip me of the $15 million, 0 cents inheritance Grandma Margaret left me. And I'd almost fallen for it. "You were incredible back there," Chloe said, her voice pulling me out of my thoughts. "I mean, standing up to all of them, that took guts, Liv." I managed a small smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "I don't feel incredible. I feel like I just lost my family." "You didn't lose them," she said firmly. "They lost you. There's a difference." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I let myself believe her. But the folder in my hands was a reminder that this wasn't over. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. When we got to my apartment, I made us tea, chamomile, because my nerves were shot, and spread the folder's contents across my coffee table. Chloe sat cross-legged on the floor, watching as I flipped through the pages. The document was dense with legal jargon, but certain lines jumped out like warning signs. The trust would be transferred to a family-managed fund controlled by my parents, with no oversight from me. There was a clause granting Lucas 25% of the assets for personal investment opportunities, which I knew meant funding his next doomed venture, or worse, his lifestyle. And buried in the fine print was a power of attorney that would let my parents make financial decisions in my name. "They weren't just trying to take the money," I said, my voice shaking with disbelief. "They wanted to use my name to make it look legit. If I'd signed this, I'd have handed them everything." Chloe's eyes widened as she scanned the pages. "This is insane, Liv. They planned this, like, down to the last detail." I nodded, my jaw tight. "And they thought I'd go along with it, because I always have. I thought of all the times I'd bailed them out. Dad's debts, Mom's rent, Lucas's coffee shop. I'd been their safety net for so long, they assumed I'd never cut the rope. But they'd miscalculated. Grandma Margaret had seen something in me they hadn't, and I wasn't about to let her down." I pulled out my phone and opened the last email Grandma had sent me, just weeks before she passed. "Liv, if things ever feel wrong, talk to my lawyer, Edward Brooks. I left something for you." I'd read those words 100 times, but now they felt like a lifeline. "I need to call him," I said, more to myself than to Chloe. She nodded, squeezing my hand. "Do it. Whatever's in that folder, it's not the whole story." The next morning, I called Edward Brooks's office. His assistant scheduled me for 10 a.m., and I arrived early, my heart pounding as I stepped into the sleek, wood-paneled office in downtown Portland. Edward was in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that put me at ease. He greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to a conference room where a sealed envelope with my name sat on the table. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," he said, pulling a USB drive from his desk. "She left this video for you, along with documents tied to the original trust your family is trying to alter." My breath caught. "A video? Can I watch it now?" I asked. He nodded and plugged the USB into his laptop. Grandma Margaret's face filled the screen, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes sharp despite her frail voice. "Liv, if you're watching this, it means things have gone the way I feared. You've always been the one I trusted most, not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. You never asked for anything, never schemed like the others." My throat tightened as she continued. "I saw how your parents treated you, how they used family as a weapon to get what they wanted. I left you everything because you deserve it, and I knew they'd try to take it." Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't look away. The video shifted to a scanned copy of the original trust, with a clause highlighted in bold. "If any attempt is made to coerce the heir into forfeiting their rights, all assets will be redirected to designated women's empowerment charities." Edward paused the video. "Your family doesn't know about this clause," he said, but if you give the word, I can enforce it today." I leaned back, my mind spinning. Grandma had built a failsafe to protect me, knowing my family's true colors. "Can I have a copy of the video?" I asked. Edward handed me a USB drive. "There's another recording too, meant for the family. She wanted them to hear it if things went this far." I took the drive, a plan forming in my head. This wasn't just about protecting the inheritance anymore, it was about making them face the truth. That night, I sat with Chloe at my studio, the USB drive on the desk between us. "You're going to show them the video, aren't you?" she asked, a spark in her eyes. I nodded. "But not at their house. I'm inviting them to my studio tomorrow night. My space, my rules." Chloe grinned. "So their 800 words left their surprise party becomes their surprise reckoning." I sent a group text to my family. "I've thought it over, let's resolve this peacefully. My studio, 5 p.m. tomorrow." Mom replied instantly, "Liv, I knew you'd come around, we'll be there." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They thought they'd won, but they had no idea I was about to rewrite the ending. The next evening, I stood in my design studio, the space I'd built from scratch with long nights and endless sketches. I'd rearranged the room for the meeting, setting up a small projector I'd borrowed from a client, and clearing the drafting table to hold the USB drive and a stack of documents from Edward Brooks. My heart was racing, but it wasn't fear. It was clarity. Tonight, I wasn't just protecting Grandma Margaret's inheritance. I was taking back my life. At exactly 5 p.m., the door chimed. Mom walked in first, her heels clicking, her face a mask of confidence in a tailored blazer. Dad followed, his tie loosened, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Lucas slouched in last, hands in his pockets, his eyes darting around like he was sizing up the room. Aunt Ellen, Uncle Carl, and Cousin Tessa trailed behind, their presence a reminder of how deep this betrayal ran. I greeted them with a nod, keeping my voice steady. "Thanks for coming, please, sit." They settled into the chairs I'd arranged in a semicircle, facing the blank wall where the projector would cast its light. Mom spoke first, her tone syrupy. "Liv, I'm so glad you're being reasonable. Let's put this misunderstanding behind us." I didn't reply, just walked to the projector and plugged in the USB drive. "I want to share something first," I said, my voice calm but firm enough to hush their murmurs. The screen lit up and there was Grandma Margaret, her silver hair neat, her eyes piercing even through the frailness of age. "If you're watching this, it means Liv refused to sign anything you put in front of her." I heard Mom shift in her seat, but no one spoke. Grandma's voice continued, steady and unyielding. "I established a trust that cannot be changed. Everything I left belongs to Liv, the only one in this family who never manipulated, never demanded, never betrayed me." Lucas looked down, his jaw tight. Dad's hands fidgeted, and Mom's confident mask cracked, her eyes narrowing. Grandma's voice grew sharper. "Susan, Robert, I know what you've done. Unreported withdrawals from the family business, personal expenses disguised as company costs, Lucas. Your investments were vacations and luxury cars. I have every transaction, every lie, documented." Mom's face paled and Dad glanced at the door like he wanted to bolt. Then came the bombshell. Grandma leaned closer to the camera, her voice dropping. "And Robert, there's something you don't know. You're not my biological son. You were adopted, a secret I kept to protect you. I loved you as my own, but I chose Liv as my heir because she's my true granddaughter, the only one I trust to honor my legacy." The room froze. Dad's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mom's hand flew to her chest, and Lucas stared at the screen, his eyes wide with shock. I paused the video, letting the weight of Grandma's words sink in. "You planned to take everything from me," I said, my voice low but cutting. "But Grandma saw it coming. She protected me, and you underestimated her and me." I turned to Dad, whose face was ashen. "You didn't know, did you? But that doesn't change what you did." Mom shot up, her voice trembling. "This is outrageous. That video proves nothing. We were just trying to help the family." I slid a folder across the table, its contents spilling out. bank statements, receipts, emails from Grandma's records. Help the family, or help yourselves. These show Mom siphoning money from the company for a beach condo. Dad, you use business funds for a boat you claimed was for clients. Lucas, your investment account paid for a trip to Ibiza. Lucas's face flushed. You're twisting this, Liv. I needed that money to network. I laughed, sharp and cold. Networking doesn't cost $50,000, 0 cents in plane tickets and hotel suites. I turned to the others. And you all went along with it, thinking I'd be too naive to notice. I picked up another document, the original trust. Here's the part you didn't count on. If anyone tries to force me to give up my rights, or takes me to court, every cent of the $15 million, 0 cents, goes to women's empowerment charities. Grandma made sure you couldn't touch it. Mom's eyes darted to Dad, then back to me, panic creeping in. You wouldn't do that, she said. You'd destroy the family. I've been holding this family together for years, I said, my voice steady. I paid your debts, your rent, your mistakes. I'm done. I turned to Dad. You're stepping down as CEO of Harper Designs effective immediately. I'm taking over, and the company's accounts are being audited. All joint credit cards are canceled. If you try to fight this, these records go to the IRS. Dad's hands shook as he stared at the resignation letter I placed in front of him. Liv, I didn't know about the adoption, he stammered. I thought I was protecting us. I looked him in the eyes. You were protecting yourself. Sign it, or the next meeting is with federal investigators. Mom's voice was a whisper now. You're tearing us apart. I shook my head. You did that when you chose greed over me. Dad hesitated, then scrawled his signature, his hand trembling. Lucas said nothing, his face a mix of anger and shame. The others sat in stunned silence, their earlier confidence gone. I gathered the documents, my voice firm. This is your last chance to walk away quietly. One more move against me and you lose everything. I opened the studio door, the cool evening air rushing in. We're done here. They filed out, Mom's heels clicking slower now, Dad's shoulders slumped, Lucas avoiding my gaze. The door closed behind them, and for the first time the silence felt like freedom. The days after the confrontation felt like waking up from a long, heavy dream. I stood in the office of Harper Designs, the company my grandmother had co-founded decades ago as a small interior design firm. Now it was a respected name in sustainable design across the Pacific Northwest, and I was its new CEO. I didn't change much in the office, same wooden desk, same framed sketches on the walls, but I replaced Dad's old business plaque with a painting Grandma Margaret had done years ago, a field of wildflowers under a fading sunset. It felt right, like she was still here, guiding me. Taking over wasn't just about signing papers or leading meetings. It was about honoring what Grandma had built and proving I was more than the family's fixer. I poured myself into the work, redesigning our portfolio to focus on eco-friendly spaces for community centers and affordable housing. But I didn't stop there. I had a bigger idea, one I knew Grandma would have loved. I founded the Margaret Harper Foundation, a nonprofit to teach young women design skills and financial literacy, helping them break free from manipulative relationships, family or otherwise. I allocated 20% of the company's profits to fund it, a move that raised eyebrows in the boardroom, but passed after I explained its purpose. It wasn't just charity, it was a promise to give others the tools I'd had to learn the hard way. A few weeks later, I got a text from Mom. Liv, your father's been struggling since the meeting, can we talk? I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep the door closed. But another part, the part that still remembered family dinners and Mom's rare, genuine laughs, knew I had to face them one last time. I replied, Friday 3 p.m. my office. They arrived on time. Mom looked polished as always, but her eyes were tired, the lines on her face deeper. Dad seemed smaller, his posture slumped. The confidence I'd grown up with replaced by something quieter, maybe regret. They sat across from me, and I placed 2 envelopes on the desk. I'm not here to shut you out forever, I said, my voice steady. But I can't be your financial crutch anymore. I slid the envelopes toward them. These are lists of financial counseling programs and therapy for compulsive spending. I'll cover the costs if you're serious about changing, but I'm not writing checks to fix your mistakes anymore. Mom's fingers brushed the envelope, hesitating. Do you think we're awful people, Liv? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head. I think you never learned boundaries, and you never let me have mine. That's what broke us? Dad spoke up, his voice hoarse. I made bad choices, not just once, over and over. But seeing you here, running this company, standing up for yourself, maybe that's the best thing Margaret ever did. His words hit me, but I didn't let them pull me back into old patterns. I'd learned not to build my future on someone else's remorse. They left quietly, no hugs, no promises. That evening I stopped by the Foundation's new office, where a group of young women was setting up for a workshop on spotting financial abuse in families. I lingered in the back, unnoticed, watching them laugh and share ideas. Chloe showed up late, carrying 2 iced coffees. Heard Lucas's girlfriend signed up to volunteer here, she said, handing me a cup. I smiled. Good. Maybe the next generation can do better. Chloe pulled out a draft for the Foundation's website. What should we put in the About Us section? I thought for a moment, then jotted down. We believe family should be a place of trust, not control. Real love doesn't demand your wallet or your worth. Chloe nodded, her eyes bright. Margaret would love that. Weeks later, I spoke at a design conference in Portland, standing before a room of young creatives. I didn't prepare a long speech, just a few notes and a truth I'd fought to claim. My name's Olivia, and I used to think family meant giving everything, your money, your time, your heart, no matter how much it hurt. I was my parents' safety net, my brother's bank. But behind closed doors, it was late-night calls, guilt trips. If you don't help, we're done for. I gave until I had nothing left. The room was quiet, every face turned toward me. I glanced at Lucas, who'd shown up unexpectedly sitting in the back. His eyes met mine and he gave a small nod, like he finally understood. I learned family isn't who shares your blood, I continued. It's who stays when you choose yourself. That might be a friend who shows up when you're falling apart, a coworker who believes in your ideas, or you, picking yourself up because you're worth it. The applause was warm, not for my title or my success, but for the truth I'd shared. That night, I sat alone in my apartment near the Willamette River, a small space filled with plants and sketches. On my desk was a letter from Grandma Margaret, one she'd written just for me, never meant for anyone else. Liv, if you ever have to choose between your family and yourself, know that real family won't ask you to lose who you are. Choosing yourself isn't leaving them. It's the only way to be whole. I folded the letter and tucked it away. For the first time, I felt no tug of war between guilt and gratitude. I didn't owe them anything anymore. My phone buzzed. Lucas, texting for the first time since the meeting. Can we talk? No money, no favors, just talk. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't angry, but I was careful. Every time I opened that door, I risked losing the peace I'd fought for. Chloe's words from weeks ago echoed in my mind. They didn't lose you over money. They lost you because they never learned how to keep someone they thought would never leave. She was right. I wasn't the good daughter anymore, the one who'd always say yes. I was Liv, the woman who'd built a life on her own terms. As fall settled over Portland, the leaves turning gold along the river, I walked into a new chapter. No more emergency calls, no more veiled requests for cash, no more guilt when I said no. My apartment was cozy, filled with things that were mine, not extravagant, just enough. On my shelf were new photos, me and Chloe at the Foundation's first workshop, me and my team pitching a community center design, me alone, smiling without needing to prove anything. What do you think about my choice? If you uncovered a truth about your family, what would you do?